Anxiety can make you feel like you're about to have, or even in the middle of, a nervous breakdown. Your nerves can feel completely fried. You feel emotionally unstable, and every day feels like you're climbing a mountain. If that's you, you're in good company, because that's extremely common with anxiety sufferers. So today, I'm going to talk about why anxiety makes you feel like you're having a nervous breakdown, what causes it, and most importantly, how you can begin to calm down your nervous system to get back to feeling normal again. Let's get started. After you've been suffering from severe anxiety for weeks or months, you can get into this exhausted, rundown state where you're completely overwhelmed and your nerves feel like they're fried. It's quite literally feeling like you're in the middle of a nervous breakdown. Now, the phrase nervous breakdown is not a medical term, but rather a euphemism describing the state that anxiety sufferers enter after a period of severe, prolonged anxiety. To be honest, I don't use this term. I instead simply refer to it as severe anxiety. But in this episode, I want to talk about the reason we feel like we're having a nervous breakdown when we're suffering from anxiety. All right, so to get right into it, the reason we feel like we're on the verge of a breakdown is because we're responding to our anxiety in the wrong way. So if you're watching this, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you're experiencing the symptoms of severe anxiety. You might be having waves of anxiety, panic attacks, heart palpitations, derealization, or other symptoms. But here's what happened. As you started to experience these sensations, you reacted defensively. You've tried to brace yourself and protect yourself. You have resisted against anxiety. It's a normal instinctive reaction. It's exactly what I did, and it's what everyone who suffers from anxiety does. So just take a second right now to think back to the last time that you had a wave of anxiety or panic. What did you do? You clenched and you tightened up, right? That's resistance, and it's an instinctive defensive response. When I'm describing this reaction, I like to compare it to when we get into cold water, like at a pool or even into one of those cold plunges. What happens is you tense up because that's your body's way of trying to protect yourself from the sensations of that cold water. With anxiety, it's the exact same thing. It's our body's way of trying to defend itself from the sensations of anxiety. Well, this tension and resistance has worn you down over time. You are constantly trying to defend yourself, and that takes an absolute ton of energy. Because instead of being in a relaxed state, like I am right now talking to you, you're repeatedly entering the state of tension and fear. Not only that, but your brain is running wild with constant worry. You're worrying about when your next panic attack will come, whether you'll be able to go to work tomorrow, or whether you'll ever recover from anxiety and feel normal again. So all of this has, over time, gradually drained your energy levels. When we enter a state of perpetual exhaustion, that's when we feel like we're about to have a nervous breakdown. That's because with extreme fatigue, you a lot of times start having crying spells, bouts of depression, and you feel like you can't handle even the slightest obstacle in your life. If you're suffering from anxiety, you can easily find yourself in this state. Fortunately, this is normal. I've been there myself. I had severe anxiety for nearly 2 years, and I felt like the most fragile human being on earth. I was being tormented by all sorts of anxiety symptoms all day long, and I was always tense and fearful of the next wave of anxiety or the next panic attack. This barrage of symptoms and the constant state of tension and resistance left me physically and emotionally exhausted. It was so bad that I honestly worried that any sort of bad news, whether it be an illness in my family, a problem at work, or a loss of a pet, anything like that would be far too much for me to handle, and I'd have a complete nervous breakdown. There was a part of me that actually thought I might end up in a psychiatric ward. But what I eventually learned, and one of the foundations of my recovery, was changing how I reacted to anxiety. I had to stop tensing up and resisting against anxiety each time it showed up. I need to stop fighting against my anxiety and all of its sensations. What I'm describing is called surrendering to anxiety, and it's step number 2 of the fearless approach that I teach. What surrendering to your anxiety does is it allows you to stop reacting to anxiety with tension and resistance. So instead of trying to fearfully resist against anxiety, you allow it to be present with you. I recently did an entire episode on why and how to surrender to anxiety, so I won't go into detail on that in this episode, but I will put a link to that episode below. But as you begin to surrender to your anxiety and you get better at it, an amazing thing is going to happen. You will no longer be in a tense and fearful state. Your anxiety symptoms will come and go, but you'll no longer see them as harmful sensations. Rather, you'll just see them merely as sensations. And by no longer resisting against anxiety, you are going to see your energy levels skyrocket, and you're going to have far better emotional stability. You'll no longer feel like you're on the edge of having a nervous breakdown. Instead, you're going to gradually begin to feel like you can handle anything that anxiety throws at you. For me, once I made this switch, I soon knew that I was no longer bound for a straitjacket and a spot at the psychiatric ward. Instead, I began taking on more projects at work. I stopped all the anxious and fearful thoughts that were swirling around my head, and I began going out and doing things that I was doing before anxiety. In other words, I started the recovery process. I was on the path to desensitizing my nervous system. Now, as I'm sure you know, fully recovering from anxiety is a multi-pronged approach. Changing how you respond to anxiety is certainly an important part, but if you're going to completely overcome anxiety, then you need to have the complete recovery system. For that, I put the framework that I use in the link below. It's called the 5-Step Cure to Anxiety and Panic Attacks. It's completely free, and it's the same system that I take my clients through to get them to full recovery. All right, if you have any questions or need clarity on anything, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and notification button. That really helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.